Welcome. It's me, Bo, here on the Film Scene Investigation channel. Hope you're doing well. In today's film review, I'm going to be taking a look at the 1996 drama Romeo and Juliet. Now, I remember watching this movie as a kid when I was over at my cousin's house back in the late 90s. I mean, this was obviously a huge Hollywood blockbuster. And yeah, given all the marketing and, the advertisements, it was everywhere. You couldn't escape it. Before we get into the review, guys, if you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. All the support is greatly appreciated. So, Romeo and Juliet from 1996 was directed by the filmmaker Baz Luhrmann, and of course was based on the iconic work from William Shakespeare. Now, this is a classic story that has been retold many times throughout the years, but this particular version by Baz Luhrmann was a more stylish and extravagant interpretation. While the previous adaptations had leaned heavily on the historical accuracy, Baz Luhrmann, in this case, decided to modernize the story, placing it in a urban environment and very much embracing that 90s pop culture. As for the narrative, the movie focused on the character Romeo, who was played by actor Leonardo DiCaprio, the son of Lord Montague, a powerful family that lived in Verona Beach. Romeo and his friends, the Montague boys, well, they were all about having a great time, partying, and occasionally taking drugs. One night, we actually saw Romeo and his friends gatecrash the costume feast party that was held at the Capulet Mansion, a party with extravagant dancers and singers. Once he and his friends arrived, the chaos ensued, and it wasn't long before Romeo set his eyes on Juliet, the daughter of Lord Capulet, who was played by Claire Danes. It was love at first sight, and Romeo was clearly enthralled by what he saw, and also Juliet too. She clearly took a liking to Romeo, and within a few minutes of meeting, the two were kissing each other. Of course, this was a fictional tale and heavily leaned into the, romance of it all. So for that, it was a magical moment, for the two embracing each other. But little did they know that they were both a part of two separate families who hated each other. And, well, there was absolutely no way that their families would agree to them having a relationship. As I said, there was just too much bad blood for the couple to actually go on and be together. But regardless, their love proved too strong, and we saw Romeo and Juliet eventually get married behind their family's back. The two were clearly madly in love with each other, and that was nice to see. My heart's a little jaded, through bad relationships. But even I can appreciate the romanticism of it all. But the happiness wouldn't last long, as the feud between the Capulets and the Montagues continued to escalate and spiral out of control. This would all lead to the death of Mercutio, Romeo's best friend, at the hands of Juliet's cousin, Tybalt, who was played by John Leguizamo. Tybalt was he was unhinged. He was a guy that you wouldn't want to mess with. He had a short fuse, a loose cannon. And once he found out about his cousin Juliet marrying a Montague, he completely lost it. He intended to kill Romeo, but in the crossfire, it was Mercutio who got stabbed. And of course, once Mercutio was dead, his best friend Romeo, well, he couldn't just stand back and just let that happen. So he himself went on a rampage to avenge his friend's death. We saw Romeo chase down Tybalt and, basically shoot him point blank. I mean, there was no way about it. It was murder. And after he'd killed Tybalt, Romeo then had to leave immediately out of town, leave Verona Beach, leave Juliet behind, and escape the authorities. The two would eventually reunite later on in the film, and eventually we saw the couple end up killing themselves for a miscommunication after Juliet faked her own death. Now, there were many great scenes throughout this film, but one that really stuck out to me was the opening sequence at the gas station. You had the Montague boys hanging out, getting some gas, when suddenly a car pulled up, full of Capulets looking for trouble, while Romeo's cousin tried his best to de-escalate the situation. The Capulets, especially Tybalt, wasn't having any of it, and a shootout then ensued. From all of the creative camera angles and the music that was used, I mean, this really was a high-octane sequence that really set the tone for the rest of the film. Going into this, audiences may have, expected a very kind of slow and drawn-out, romantic love story. But here we are, guns and fire, and it was great to see. The editor, Jill Bilcock, did a wonderful job when it came to the editing. They implemented a wide range of techniques, including the extreme close-up and these rapid quick cuts. To be honest, that whole sequence, it felt very much like an old school MTV 90s music video. That's what it was obviously kind of influenced by. And you saw that, it kind of flowed just like a music video. As for the film's overall look, there can be no denying that Romeo and Juliet from 1996 was a very well-made production. Clearly a lot of time and effort had gone into it, and it showed on screen. And, the cinematographer, Donald McAlpine, did a brilliant job, bringing some really beautiful visuals to the film. There were two actually that really stuck out to me, and one of them was at the very beginning when we were introduced to Romeo as he was standing on this stage that was located on Verona Beach. You had this wide shot of Romeo standing there on stage, feeling lost, confused, lonely, as the sun rose up in the background. And it's just a beautiful shot, and just great work from McAlpine. The other visual that I really liked came at the end of the film when we saw the interior of the church with, all of the flowers and the neon crosses. You had Romeo sneaking into the church, trying to avoid the authorities. He pushed open the double doors, and it was revealed, this brilliant looking set piece. It just looks so cool. It's hard to kind of put into words, but it was, the combination of old meets new, the neon lights, representing a lot more of, contemporary, modernized kind of style. And then we have candles and the flowers, and of course the old school interior decor of the church. It was just, a great set piece, and clearly whoever came up with that, respect to them, because it was great looking. It really suited that kind of world in which Baz Luhrmann had created. And I'm not married, I've never been married, but if I had a choice, I would love to get married in a church like that. And thinking about it, religion did play a big part. It was a major theme within this adaptation. There was tons of Christian and Catholic iconography that we saw throughout the film, from Juliet's bedroom, the way it was designed, to the overall look of Verona Beach. Even down to the little stuff that I noticed, like the image of Jesus printed on Tybalt's red bulletproof vest. I mean, not only did it look good, but it really suited his character. I personally loved seeing all of the imagery on show. and it felt very fresh compared to today's progressive standards. Another aspect that I really enjoyed was the fashion in this film. There were so many awesome characters, dressed up, and in particular, I loved the look of the Montague boys. Those guys really embraced the current 90s culture that, was going on at the time, especially the character Samson, Romeo's cousin, who was played by actor Jamie Kennedy. He had this, bright, colourful shirt on, had some chains around his neck, and had this, short, spiky pink hair. Just a brilliant look, suited that whole 90s counterculture that Baz Luhrmann was trying to showcase. Before we get into the performances, I had to take a moment to talk about the amazing soundtrack to Romeo and Juliet. One of the best soundtracks I've heard in a long time. There were so many good bands that were featured, including Radiohead and the Cardigans. They had some great tracks that really complemented the film's overall, counterculture style. I'm not a huge Radiohead fan. I think they've been a little bit overhyped for the years, but I will say their song Talk Show Host that featured in this movie, one of my favourite Radiohead songs, and brilliant stuff. And, it wasn't just the selection of tracks that were compiled that were great. It was also how the songs were used within the film. The song Kissing You by the artist Des'ree was featured during the scene where Romeo and Juliet kissed for the very first time. The warm and soulful music that we heard, it really heightened the romantic sensibilities that made it a standout moment. In some ways, it kind of reminded me of the Trainspotting soundtrack in the sense that, you can just pick up the soundtrack itself without ever kind of watching the film and just enjoy it for it being a great compilation of tracks. As for the performances, given this was such a large ensemble cast, I really can't say that there were any bad performances. I really can't. I mean, this was a big Hollywood production, a big summer blockbuster release, and clearly all the actors knew this and brought their A game. From Brian Dennehy to Pete Postlethwaite to John Leguizamo. I mean, there were some great performances throughout this film, and it was great to see. As for Leonardo DiCaprio, I thought he was very good in the lead role. He brought a sense of brooding intensity to his portrayal of Romeo. Obviously, when it came to the casting, the filmmaker Baz Luhrmann was targeting a younger audience, to entice them into the movie theatres. So that was obviously one of the reasons why DiCaprio was cast. I mean, he was the 90s heartthrob. Teenage girls loved him, and so that made him the perfect choice. I thought Claire Danes did a pretty good job playing Juliet, Romeo's lover. I can't say that there were any scenes that really stuck out to me that showed her, brilliant acting ability, but still, she was very good and had some great chemistry with DiCaprio. One performance that did stick out to me was that of Paul Rudd, who played the bachelor Dave Paris, a man who was deeply in love with Juliet. Sadly for him, the feeling was not reciprocated. This was, of course, an early role for Paul Rudd, who had just starred in the Halloween sequel, The Curse of Michael Myers, 1 year earlier. He played the part of Dave Paris very well, and, just rewatching this film again after all these years and seeing Paul Rudd, it's just amazing that the guy, hasn't really aged. He still looks, relatively the same as he did over 30 years ago. And I have to say as well, before I revisited this film, I had completely forgotten that Jamie Kennedy was even in this film. I like Kennedy and his comedic talents, and he certainly fitted in and suited the kind of contemporary MTV style tone and vibe that Baz Luhrmann was going for with this adaptation. What was really surprising to me, though, was that this was actually Jamie Kennedy's first feature film role. I mean, that's pretty amazing given the level of this production. This wasn't some sort of small indie film. This was a huge Hollywood blockbuster with some big stars, some big established actors. And Jamie Kennedy comes in without hardly any experience and, delivers a very good performance. Of course, it wasn't a huge part, and Kennedy didn't really have much to do outside that opening sequence at the gas station. But still, it was a great debut performance. And also, what a great year Jamie Kennedy had in 1996. He had this movie and, of course, the film Scream, Wes Craven's horror film that obviously was another cult movie as well. So, yeah, what a great year he had. So, dislikes for Romeo and Juliet from 1996. My biggest dislike, and I use the term dislike, but it's really more of a nitpick. There wasn't really anything that bad about this film. But if I had to be critical, I would have to say the ending of the film. That was something that I would have changed. We had both Romeo and Juliet now deceased after obviously killing themselves. And we had a montage of clips that we'd seen earlier in the film, with the last shot being of Romeo and Juliet kissing in water. For me, this was absolutely perfect. Not just with the music, but that image. For me, it really encapsulated the love that Romeo and Juliet had for each other. They freeze-framed it, and there it was. Perfect. And then I thought they'd, cut to the credits. But no, there was this little 2-minute sequence that we saw of both Romeo and Juliet's bodies being put into the ambulance as all of the authorities and, press and families looked on in sadness. It was fine. It didn't ruin the film. As I said, it was a nitpick. But if I was in the editing room, I would have said, just scrap this last 2 minutes, man. We don't really need to see the bodies being put into the ambulance. It doesn't really add anything. We know they're dead. For a film that, leans into the romanticism, then, hey, that image of them kissing in the water was the perfect image to encapsulate and end this, story, this tragedy. But, no, they didn't. And for me, it was just kind of ruined. Overall, I just think it was a bit of a silly decision. I understand that the ending kind of ties back into the very beginning, with the media, the press coverage. But, I just would have cut it. So, that's my dislike for the film. And so, ratings for Romeo and Juliet from 1996. After thinking about it and taking into account, the style and everything that was done, I'm going to be rating this movie a strong 7 out of 10. This movie, Romeo and Juliet, was an extravagant interpretation that fused stunning visuals and some contemporary music with Shakespeare's Elizabethan dialogue. The director, Baz Luhrmann, attempted to retell this classic Shakespeare story and try to make it more accessible to a younger audience. And, by him steeping it all in, pop culture, I think he did a pretty good job. If you've seen Romeo and Juliet from 1996, then please let me know your thoughts and memories in the comment section below. For all those out there who haven't seen this yet, I would definitely recommend it. If you're a fan of, big Hollywood spectacle, then definitely give it a go. You'll enjoy it. For those out there who, are wanting more of a traditional interpretation, then perhaps this version isn't for you. And well, that is all from me today, guys. I do hope you've enjoyed this review of Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet from 1996. I'll be back next week, of course, with another cult movie review. If you like the content that I do here, please consider subscribing to the channel. All the support, all the likes, all that stuff. I really do appreciate it. And well, take care. See you next week.